All right, so the next item on our agenda, work session agenda this evening is the report on the feasibility study for Phase Next. And Eric, you're going to start this, I guess? All right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss Phase Next with you again tonight. Over the past few weeks, city staff and Mark Haschel with Kimley Horn have been working on public input meetings and surveys, and we're here to present those findings to you. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mark to give the presentation.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Council and Mayor, and also the citizens who participated this past month in the public process. So this evening, let's see if I'll get this going right. So quickly, I'll just go over our progress to date, the results of the survey, the public meeting, what we heard there at the two meetings. We'll talk a little bit about cost recovery also. As consultants, part of our job is to make recommendations, and we'll do that tonight based on what we've heard, and then present the updated master plan. So as you know, in May and June, we had the council work session. We've had facility tours. We've also gathered up operational data. July, we had the survey posted online and also two very well-attended public meetings. The results of the survey, that we've had over 1,500 surveys completed. Has that gone up anymore, Eric, do you think? Yeah, really good participation on a survey. The intent of the survey, and I think there might have been a little confusion, was to gather public input on support for Phase Next and also serve as a preliminary baseline for programming for the Senior and Activity Center. I guess the items that were ranked important and very important from the survey that stood out is that over 80% of the respondents supported a new activity slash senior center, the multi-generational center, aquatic amenities, and also athletic facilities. We had two really good public meetings, a lot of input from the community, a lot of showing by the art community, which has been mentioned tonight. On the general comments, what we heard is replacement and upgrade of the Boys Ranch is past due. We also heard that it's very important to support and preserve onstage and the Arts Council, a common theme tonight, to complete the upper channel and protect the water quality in the ponds for the wildlife, expand the gymnasium and indoor programs. We had a young mother that talked about having to go to Arlington to get the programming she wanted. And then also we were asked to address Phase Next in the context of the other planned projects. Items supported, of course, were the Senior Activity Center, the expanded outdoor and indoor aquatics, creative and the performing arts were very well supported, and the upgrade of the athletic facilities, which relates back to the survey results. We had a couple of other suggestions. One gentleman suggested we do a large public-private indoor sports facility, and another lady suggested we consider a parking garage on the site. Cost recovery. We've got Councilman Hunsaker on board to help us with detailed numbers, but while as we don't want to overcharge for the facilities, it is important to recover the operations cost, and we're projecting that a new activity senior center in Bedford could recover 65 to 75% with moderate pricing. The model for this study was looking at pricing similar or less than the NRH Center, which was visited. Their goal is more like 90 or 100%, so we're not trying to do that. We've also downsized the center a bit to more 76,000 square feet instead of over 80,000 square feet. So a similar fee structure or less than to the NRH Center. Debt service and capital replacement funds are typically excluded from those kind of calculations. And we learned in this study that aquatics and the banquet hall, which has been discussed some, are revenue neutral. So they do generate revenue, but they cost as much to operate as they do to generate revenue. So if you need them, if you want them, if they're needed for quality of life, then they should be there, but they're not a big net revenue generator. So, as I mentioned, part of our job is to take all of this in and make recommendations to you. And from what we've heard, we see no reason not to keep on stage in the Arts Center at the BRAC and Boys Ranch location. as long as the city can support them and they're providing a valuable service. We think it's very important to complete the athletic facilities from the 2010 master plan. That's been a number of years now, and they're still needed desperately. To construct the new multi-generational activity and senior center at the Harwood location, which in turn keeps us from having to displace the current users with the construction. I think it came out at our meetings, there was a question about the banquet facility. So that could be considered to be eliminated, or it could be used for other spatial programming in the center. The aquatics, we recommend to improve the aquatic facilities, both indoor and out. We also suggest that all facilities should be of very high quality, and of course maintain the operations of the existing indoor and out and aquatic facilities until the new center is in place. I think based on what we've heard for the need, we've done a needs assessment, public support, and the quality of life that this kind of project would bring to Bedford, that we surely recommend that the Boys Ranch upgrades be one of the first priorities for you to consider on the table. We think it'll bring more good things to the city. So we've updated our master plan based on what we've heard. We believe that it could be accomplished in a 3-step, 5-year implementation plan. It's a lot of work. It's a big project. We would suggest starting the design of the activity center, senior center, and the outdoor athletic facilities at the same time. The outdoor facilities are about a 2-year project, design, bidding, and construction. We feel like that the activity senior center is more like a 3-year project. Also, we've already done the plans with phase 1 of the upper channel. So we could get started on that immediately while we're doing the design work on the outdoor facilities and doing the programming for the indoor facility, which still needs a bunch of meetings to totally shake that out and get it the way it needs to be. So step 1, the outdoor facilities. Step 2 would be the indoor facilities up at Harwood. And step 3 would be the completion of the expansion of BRAC, the amphitheater, and the new roads and parking and soccer, while preserving onstage in the arts in that part of the park. So this is the time that I'd like to answer any questions or get help from my staff, from council. The next steps would be to have a special meeting if you choose to do that and take it to a bond election. During the pre-planning for the bond election, we would do some additional public outreach to communicate about the plan, and the bond election would be in November. We're also suggesting that we reallocate part of our existing fees to do a 3D visualization of the phase next. One gentleman told us, I just want to see the plan. I have to understand it to be able to vote for it. And if we do that 3D flyover, showing what the facilities would be like, what the new activity center would look like, and how it could be the heart of the community, we think that would be very valuable so the voters can make a good decision. That was brief.
All right, well, thank you, Mark. So clearly this is an opportunity now for us to give feedback, give input, and then with the desired result of us trying to hone this down into the package we want, to create for the bond election. So, so we have some people that want to speak. So clearly, I know in the material that you gave us, the indoor facility, you broke it in indoor facility budgeting, and then you broke it to outdoor piece. And
Yes.
You haven't kind of stopped short of showing all of that at this point. But as you were laying out your brief overview, you talked about the fact that doing this in a 3-year window. So I guess the very first
Three-phase and a 5-year window.
Okay, so what really jumps out at me is, I guess and again, I'm not a construction guy, so maybe this is hard for me to conceptualize, but I'm trying to figure out why it would take 3 years to build a new facility on the corner.
Well, I'm being generous. If you recall, phase 1 was just the ponds, and it drug on a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the real reason on the 3-year time frame for the activity/senior center is that we would see starting on the programming. I mean, we're ready to start with the project we have now on doing some of the detailed programming. So we may could gain some time. We just wanted to allow time for the sale of the bonds, for the meetings that need to take place with an advisory group and staff on the planning of the new center, and then plenty of time to bid it, design, bid it, and construct it. It's a big job to design one of these facilities. I can answer in more detail with Stephen if you want me to, but.
No, that helps. I mean, there may be
Okay.
more detailed questions as we go here. So let me get into that. We have some speakers. Councilman Fisher, Mayor Pro Tem Fisher's first. So there you go.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes, sir.
It's been a fun and quick trip down Boys Ranch Lane with this deal. And I appreciate the plan that you presented here that the public can see on the board there. I guess it's not what I envisioned. I think that I don't think that you can call it a true remake of Boys Ranch Park unless the full park's being remade. And although we're taking care of one large building, they're still leaving two others and a splash that, by your own estimation, is probably in a 5-year window of needing some major reinvestment. And so I was hoping tonight that we would see a true in-depth and completely new park. It seems like the first budget that you gave us was around the $70 million figure, and it seems like it's still kind of at that $70 million figure, but we have one new building. Would it be in your estimation that you've got in here that the performance hall would be about $4 million? Do you think that that's a fair estimate if it was a space built on the Bedford School property? Is $4 million generous enough to build a new structure on a different piece of property?
Probably not. I could get Stephen up to talk about that, but one of the values of doing the multi-generational center and combining all those uses into the same facility is sharing staff, sharing infrastructure, sharing parking. And so that really is the square footage space for that. We called it in the past a performance/banquet hall. It's a big flexible space. It could be, you've seen the one at NRH Center, and that's still in the budget. So I think that it would be more money if we built a separate facility on a separate site, and we haven't looked at that yet.
Okay. Okay. In your previous run through, you had indoor aquatics, but wasn't there an outdoor aquatics component of that as well?
It's still there. We didn't draw up a new aquatic center for you, but
Oh, okay.
the $9 million to do a new splash is in there. We understood that you guys may need to play with the numbers and allocations a little bit or want to comment on that. So right now, a full redo of splash is in the concept, and all of the buildings, except for Onstage and the Arts Council, are being replaced and combined into the senior activity center, senior/activity center. Splash would even get a new bathhouse, so it would blend in with the new building. So really, there's no existing buildings remaining except for Onstage and the Arts in this plan.
And I guess I was kind of hoping that by moving everything up to that corner, that we would free up more green space.
It would be nice to do that. Onstage and the Arts, I mean, there are ways to accommodate them in the center. The thing I would hate to see, and it's certainly not my decision, but the group is very dedicated. I think they like having their own space. They can do what they want to in that space. I'm sure they could use double the space they have in a new space. But whether or not that should be in the new activity center or should be over at the Bedford Commons or somewhere else, I think was brought up during the meeting. So, I certainly think that, we could just do a theater instead of the banquet hall in that same space in the activity center, if that was what the city wanted to do. But they might prefer to keep their own space until additional funding or donations or whatever can give them a new home in the new Bedford Commons or some other location.
Okay.
So we didn't want to disenfranchise them in this plan.
Sure. Well, and I don't think anybody does. But I think that we've got, in the case of the Bedford School, and I've shared this with the council at our work session on Friday, that we've got a pretty gem of a facility in the old Bedford School that really and truly it needs a reinvestment anyway. It's literally falling apart. But if there was a way to add to that building or that site itself as part of the cultural district, that maybe some of these funds that would be going towards whatever we're calling the onstage, whether it's performance theater or whatever, maybe some of that money might be better off used to help that site as well as get the biggest bang for our buck as far as the amenities of the Boys Ranch in an open space. That would be my strong recommendation.
What you're saying in essence is where they have $4 million allocated for banquet / performance, you're saying potentially keep that in the ask, but allocate it at a different location as opposed to at
Sure.
the Boys Ranch. I think
Sure.
that's what you're saying, right?
Sure.
Okay. That's not a
And
bad
that would
idea.
give them their own dedicated space. It would give a new life to the old Bedford School property that's basically been vacant for a year. It would maintain the historical aspect of that building and give it a new bit of flavor. And quite frankly, I think a huge potential for more revenue when you can actually hold a wedding and actually have people come to your wedding, because the space is really great and picturesque for pictures, but it's very inadequate for actually inviting guests to come see your special day. So,
Sure.
And if I may just ask you a question, Councilman Fisher, so in your thinking along those lines, splash and that piece on the drawing that you're looking at, that would become potentially green space?
yes, that would be my hope. I mean, we're coming to the citizens of Bedford and asking for $70 million. And I think there's no doubt it's a ton of money. But I think it would be short-sighted to say we're going to do this, we're going to spend $70 million, but we're going to leave these facilities there. I don't think it's going all the way. And I kind of, in this instance, I'm not all the time. I'm kind of an all or nothing kind of guy. So that's. Do you think this could be done design build to shrink that window?
We can work with you on time. I mean, it's very possible that the outdoor facility, let's say the step one, could be done perhaps in 18 months instead of 24 months. It's definitely possible that the activities senior center could be done perhaps in 2 years or 30 months.
18 for construction.
Yeah, but you're going to need at least probably 9 or 12 for design and programming and bidding.
We're not still working yet.
Yeah. So yes, it can be shrunk. Once again, we've been trying to allocate or suggest a budget that would get the project done. We are suggesting a brand new splash. I mean, splash could come out of the equation, but so we're not proposing to leave the old splash as is. We just haven't designed a new splash yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so,
But it would. You're not projecting that to be up at this senior activity center.
Oh, no.
It would be where
in
it
the
is.
current location, and perhaps that block could shrink a little bit if it's all new, so that there is more green space at the amphitheater location. And if there's a new home for onstage, definitely that parking and that could become green space, which would add to the amphitheater location. Mr. Fisher, it actually occurred to us that you might want to carve out some money out of this bond program for the arts, because there is such strong support for it and it is such an important part of Bedford. And I think that you could do that. You could pull $4 or $5 million out of the activity center budget And that could be a budget that could be used to support and leverage for the arts in the best way possible, whether it's matching funds for a donor, whether it's expanding the old Bedford school, anything like that that would provide a good home and support that activity. This project is still doable if we pull that square footage out of the building.
Is there a chance to get the splash up on that senior activity corner?
I don't think there's really room for it.
Okay.
And if it's a little bit tight as it is now, so we need to expand it, but there's a lot we can do with it. And if we built a new splash and, or thoroughly remodeled it, got the entrance off of the shared parking, it's gonna be a whole different look, you know, with a new entrance to the new parking and the new direction. We've tried to include money because we are trying to create a new vision in this program to make sure we have sufficient funds for site development. A great thing to do would be to get the overhead utilities underground. That's really hard to do nowadays, but it's something we would want to look at in this project to try to really improve the image there at the corner of Forest Ridge and Harwood. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all I
you.
have for now.
Thank you, Councilman Fisher. And just a follow-up question. So if we're doing some of those things as mentioned by Councilman Fisher, would it change any of the parking space requirements as you laid up? We took things out,
I don't think so. We've actually scaled back in several areas from the Inter-Aid Center. You know, Bedford is smaller, and so we have 300 spaces instead of 4. We also have 100 or 200 cars across the way. We were trying to get about 600 cars in the area of the amphitheater and the rec center and Splash to use as joint parking. And I think that's about the parking that's needed now for Fourth Fest when when it has space to do what it's been doing in the past.
so the 600 and the 300, that's 900 new spaces.
Yes, 900 total for the whole park, and we've got numbers that support 900 to 1,000 spaces for all the activities. We can share those with you
Okay,
later.
but I mean, on your estimates, the 900 spaces are new spaces.
Yeah, everything is new, the drives, the parking, you know, any of the new trails and sidewalks are
Right,
all-
but I mean, so
Yeah.
you're because there's existing parking out there today. You're
Yes.
saying that is eliminated
Yes,
and creating 900 new spaces in the council.
yes.
Okay.
And trying to get them laid out better with more landscaping, concrete parking lots, curbs. And we'd love to have less parking, but building a parking garage, I don't think is feasible you know, we'd still need the spaces and it would be a large garage.
All right, Councilman Sarter?
Thank you, Mayor.
Next.
A couple of questions. I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Fisher asked. With the construction of the tennis courts going to the athletic side of this, I see in this plan 7 tennis courts,
Yes.
correct? Is that enough tennis courts if we wanted to host a tournament in that location, that someone would be able to host a tournament with 7 courts? Would they need more or less?
It's always better to have more. I think that, you know, we could easily get 8 in the space we have instead of 7, and we could probably absorb that in the budget. Right now, it's more of a recreational tennis complex. You could have some tournaments leading up to a larger tournament where they might go to Capel, to the Wagon Wheel Tennis Center we did some work on, or other facilities. But we're trying to respect the tennis, but to build a large tennis center is probably more than this budget could absorb, or spatially that we could absorb. You know, we did the Waco Regional Tennis Facility, and it's got about 20 courts down near McLennan County Community College, and we just don't have the space probably to do that. But we can do a pro shop with it, or we can just do a shelter and restrooms, which is what we have now.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your remake of Splash, does that still include indoor aquatics as well as outdoor aquatics?
Yeah, the indoor is part of the budget of the activity and senior center, and that's in the diagram that I showed earlier, and I can pull it up if you need me to. The outdoor would be expanded. I would see us redoing all the buildings. I would see us adding a real lazy river, which is very popular, replacing the bowl slide, which has been kind of an operational difficulty, with a new teen attraction, and a new children's pool that's larger with more exciting features.
So we would have indoor aquatics on the corner,
Yes,
And we would have outdoor aquatics in the current location where
Yes, sir.
Splash is today.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason being, we would still need a separate entrance for the outdoor facility, even if it was up by the indoor, and we would need separate restrooms and showers. It really doesn't work well to combine the use of those from a security standpoint. So if we had space, we could move it up there, more like the Muhlenbeck Center, but we just don't have the space.
And last question, does this change the entrance coming off of Forest Ridge to a different location?
I'm sorry, Wayne?
Does it change the entrance off of Forest Ridge to a different location?
Yes, it does. We've moved it down to the light. I think also that we, by grading and how we set up the activity center site and the expansion of Splash, that we could raise those grades up a little bit, reduce the slope, also bring those side drives that come in from both sides up to meet that, and create a more inviting and a safer entrance into the park.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Councilman Starter. Dr. Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, I think Tom's already left from the Cultural Commission, but I would echo. Not to, oops, I turned wrong. Did you turn it off? Am I on?
Push it.
Yeah, I know, you turned me off.
I didn't touch it.
We make a great comedy team, don't we?
I didn't
No,
touch
I agree with Tom. He spoke that Bedford is really at a crossroads here. And I do think that one of the elements to choosing the right road here is what we do with the Boys Ranch. And I see that as a jewel that we've had in this city for ever since it was here. And it's been greatly underutilized for all these years, and it's about time that we address some of those issues. I think almost anything we do is going to be an improvement, but as is usual, the devil's in the details, and I kind of agree with some of the comments that's already been made. It would be nice to have the outdoor facilities up by the indoor facilities. I've seen these before where there's actually connections where indoor, outdoor, or even connected where they could go. And what prevents us is just size.
Well, we've got about 2 acres for the senior/activity center, and we've got a little over 2 acres shown for Splash, but we would need about 2 acres. So that's 4 acres, which would eat up most of the space on the corner unless we brought the drive-in straight from the new entry location over towards the pond and curved it up to carve out more space on the corner, which then would run the drive through the amphitheater side and the green space. So it's just space limitations.
I understand, and I'm glad to hear that at least there's some possibilities. I don't know what the rest of the council feels like, but I would really like to see us work towards that effort. But you speak of the amphitheater. Is that something to come later, or?
No, we would recommend doing a permanent stage, working with staff for the Fourth Fest and other performances, and to create a permanent performance facility.
Okay, you're talking about that special events for $1 million.
Yes, special
We
events
can
there.
do an outdoor amphitheater type
Yes.
facility in this current budget at
Yes.
$1 million, if I see right. I don't want to interrupt that, because if that's going to be up there, I think that's kind of critical to.
We wrestled with that same thing, and we did look at trying to combine them up on the corner. It's just, they start pushing that parking then away from
Yeah.
it into the heart of the park, and it's a tough decision.
It's a
but-
give and take, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Well, the other area that I was wanted to explore was there seems to be some talk about moving the on-stage away from the Boys Ranch and in relation to the Old Bedford School. And I do think there's some great opportunities there to further enhance our arts ability here in Bedford. I agree with most of what the Cultural Commission, Tom, said earlier about it being a true drawer to people, a destination that will bring people, truly bring people to Bedford. You say we can't do that for that $4 million here. How much more would it take, roughly? I know you can't give us, but
We
would we
don't know
double,
exactly,
triple?
Mr. Turner, but for example, if, let's say that we take out the banquet/performance hall from the center, and let's say we pull out 4 or 5 million, that's a significant investment to add on or build or modify the old Bedford School, add some sort of theatrical area to it. And so, since we haven't done concepts, we haven't done detailed programming, that kind of exercise could take place during the design of the Activity Senior Center. And if you wanted to carve out that money for performance or arts, then that could be studied at that time. And you could then make a good decision because you'd have both options in front of you. And that's part of the time frame too of the 3-year time
Well, I see a
frame.
great opportunity for that, utilizing that old Bedford School property in a very positive way, and going along with our idea of we're at a crossroads, and that's going to be very much important. Now, in this current budget, one last question. This current budget, does it call for, I know that Bedford on stage and the arts building, I mean, the arts center thing would be operational while the construction was going on. Would those buildings be raised at the end of that? And
We're not proposing that. That's certainly a decision that has to be, I know the lease is renewed every year, but we're not proposing that. We modified our plan so that they could stay as long as they're using them and as long as the city can support them using them. So we
So
didn't
you're
want
saying
to
it would
displace-
cost more to raise those, and I agree with Councilman Fisher about, I'd like to see more green space, and there's some area for more green space in that vicinity.
It would be nice if there's a new home for them to get that back as green space. And
Yeah.
we had an exhibit earlier that showed it that way, and I think it's doable. And then we really think, like you think, that an investment in the arts is warranted, and maybe we do that in a different way, because eventually those buildings will fail and they will need to come down.
With that in mind, that they're on their last leg as they exist, we need to at least keep that on the agenda for further action. But I just say we're at a crossroads, and I hope the people of Bedford will respond to this opportunity to take the right road, and this is a great opportunity for us. Yes, it's going to cost some money, but I think it's worth it. Bedford deserves this type of facility and activity.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. And Councilwoman Sable.
Hi, Mark. I'm going to throw a wrench here, and it's not intentional, but I think this is something we need to consider. I truly believe that this city needs more sales tax. So how do you do that? You put the destination first, and that would be the Performance Center, the Old Bedford School. So in the 70 million, I would like to see the Old Bedford School and possibly an annex for performance or theater in that position, and whatever we have. And then I would like to have an indoor swimming facility. And I realize that splash is not good for too many more years. So we get the indoor facility going, we wipe splash off the face of the earth. Well, we move over to Roy Savage Park. We build Rusty's Miracle Park that's for disabled children and all ages. We put all of our, so that would be in a few years. It would give Mr. Fisher more green space. I think that we need tennis courts and pickleboards, sort of what Mr. Sartor talked about, maybe for tournament use. A banquet facility for 300 to 500 with kitchen facilities for catering. Of course, all the outdoor athletics. I'd like to see a recovery cost of 75%. And the way we might do that is cut the size of our building. The way I look at this, North Richland Hills is 63,000 people, and they've got growth. They've got huge growth because they're a huge, well, their city is going to grow. We're locked in. In fact, your statistics showed that our demographic had dropped. So my thinking is that we're not going to be like Hearst, where we're going to expand this facility. And frankly, we can't with what you're putting there. So I'm saying we really cut down on the space in this indoor facility to accommodate the money that's required to do the performance art over at the old Bedford School and also the rec center, which I kind of hate the name senior center. I think it ought to be multi-generational or a living and wellness center, you know, because I think the thing we want to do is attract younger seniors to that facility. If you continue to call it senior, they still sort of don't really like that.
Sure.
Let's see. I am a little concerned. Your survey did not include anything about tolerance for fees, like how much people could tolerate for athletic fees, or I know, I think you quoted that an adult going to North Richland Hills paid $300 a year. Now, I don't know, and a family of 6 would go $600. But with our facility costing so much more than the North Richland Hills, I would think that our fees are going to have to be higher. And yet, we have a facility down the street, Fitness 2000, you can go to for $10 a month. Harris HEB Fitness, their fees are $21 a month. I think there's other gyms that are about $25, and I realize that we'll have more in this facility so that people will be willing to pay for it. But one of the other statistics that kind of stuck out to me was that you've got 4,000 regular visitors at the North Richland Hills facility, and that's about 6.5% of your population. If we get the same 6.5%, then we'd be around 3,500 people that would have regular attendance. So that would mean our fees might even have to be higher if we go to 75% of cost recovery.
Would you like us, I mean, it's a deep subject, but we firmly believe, and we're being very conservative, that 75% cost recovery is doable. And North Richland Hills was trying to get quite a bit more cost recovery. It took them 5 years to break even on their banquet facility with very good marketing and very good use of that facility. You know, there's several things we could do to address your concerns. I think we could have a smaller dining facility along with the senior center if we wanted to. If we didn't want to do a full banquet facility, we could pull some money out of the building and make it smaller by either eliminating the indoor aquatics or reducing the size of the banquet facility. And we could also pull some money out of the outdoor facilities. I mean, instead of redoing Splash totally, we could spend $5 million to renovate it. And so, I mean, to still do a good plan, if we scale back the size of the building, and pull some money out of it, and if we scale back the Splash to $5 million, you could potentially pull $10 million out for other projects, which could be the Miracle Park, which could be for the art, support of the arts at the Bedford Commons, or you could reduce the program down to a $60 million program. I do think it's really important that you value equally the outdoor and the indoor, and although Splash you know, could be wiped, it's still very popular and very supported, and it generates very good revenue in the summer that it's open. So I think, you know, that we've tried to create a budget that we know we can accomplish the program with, and we wanted to create a budget that would have some flexibility in it for you to consider. If we squeeze on it too hard, we're going to start ending up getting less than, you know, high quality facilities. And so that goes back to doing whatever we do really well. So I think it's appropriate, if you guys deem it so, to designate some of those funds for other important projects out of this amount if we want to do that. But we can't do extra things without increasing the budget.
Well, and see, that's my issue, is that I think, knowing our sales tax figures, destination is huge to us at this point because they're dropping, quite frankly. So anything that we can do to bring people here to spend money in Bedford, that should be our number one goal. And a rec center will be great for our community. I'm all for it, and I don't mean to be on the opposite side of everybody, but I do think we've got some serious issues when it comes to revenue. And so that is what I sort of came up with as an alternative.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I thank you, Councilwoman Sable. All right, and Mark, thank you very much. We're at the end of the work session time. We're going to revisit this again in the regular meeting at the
Okay.
agenda to make a final decision about what we want to do and package this. So
All right.
thank you for kind of giving us a recent update, more updated information about the two town hall meetings and the other information you've gathered to kind of coalesce all this into some decisions. I think for us, for the council, clearly, I think we've heard commentary up here that talks about how to get as many things as we can as a benefit to the city of Bedford in terms of modifications, whether it be at the Boys Ranch or at the Old Bedford School and so forth. So I think that's probably going to be the theme as we get into that agenda item,
Sure.
but thank you. That's item 18. All right, so clearly what we need to do here, Eric, I'll let you frame this if you'd like, but I mean, I think from our perspective, what I think, council, we need to do here is we have to give direction to staff and to the consultant as to what we want this bond package to, at the very least, contain in terms of dollars. We've talked about a number of different components and taking things out, putting things in, and I think from my perspective, there's an opportunity to address this from a dollar amount and then continue to work on fine-tuning the component pieces. Clearly, I think we all seem to be in agreement on a new multi-generational recreational facility that has a senior component or what was the term you used, Ms. Sable? The
Multi-generational.
no, the other
Actually, I want to have it called the Health and Wellness.
health and wellness center attached to that. So we clearly seem to all want that physical piece. We seem to all be interested in indoor swimming facilities. We seem to be interested in the outdoor components that make up this, and the location of this facility up on the corner of Harwood and Central. We all seem to be somewhat in agreement on, I believe. And so I think one of the focuses we have to do is to in an attempt to try to address other needs, cultural and arts and everything else, is just really craft this in the context of value first and then figure out where everything goes. I think I framed that based on what we've been talking about so far in the work session. So did you want to add any? Okay, well, I have some comments or questions, so.
Oh, you're fine.
Yes. So Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's also, it's a collective we,
Yeah,
along
I
with the 1,500
Right,
respondents
right.
of the survey, which is quite a good number. From my perspective, from the first public hearing on this issue, I asked two very pointed questions. One is, would you support this bond at, I think it was $70 or $75 million? And almost every hand in the room went up. Granted, it was a slighted crowd due to the onstage crowd being there. I'll discount that. But the second question was even more telling, because I said, what would you support a $35 million bond? And a great deal of the hands went down, which tells me, regardless if you're for the arts and regardless if you're for whatever else, you support the bond. So I think that we are just in calling for it and allowing the public to see the plans and let them decide if this park is what they want or these aspects are what they want. I think that there is room within that $70 million confines to produce a park plan and facilities at the park, and also fund some money to, if we want to call it the arts, or to and we could call it a theater company. I think that how much, I don't know, but I'm gonna venture to guess it's under $10 million. If we cannot build a theater banquet space for under $10 million, we probably shouldn't build it. But with that, I would call on, if that's the way it were to go, and that, and, you know, on stage is the, resident or company and resident at that particular theater, that they would take some of the responsibility and have to raise the money for, I don't want to say the furnitures and fixtures, but the lights and electronics. If we're gonna provide a $4 or $5 million theater, then their buy-in to the project could be that. I think that there's some money to obtain to get to that portion. I mean, there's a $10 million contingency allowance in this budget. I think that's more than generous, and I think it's tends to be money that'll just go somewhere else anyway. So I think that we can take some of that money and make part of it to fixing the Old Bedford School and adding the banquet space, which is necessary for it to be a decent revenue generator, at least more than it is now, and a theater. And then go with what we have here. The question Mark, all the rage is indoor, outdoor water. What if we just had indoor? I mean, what if we just put more money into the indoor and made it really, really spectacular?
The more money we put into indoor, the less revenue, net revenue you capture. That sounds crazy. You think we
Yeah,
operate
because of the
all year
building.
long, but everybody likes to swim outside in the summer, whether you're from Michigan or South Texas. You generate, you have high intensity, so you generate a lot of revenue with the family type users. A competitive facility will not generate revenue if we build a big lap pool indoor, not enough to offset the operating cost.
Okay.
I don't think so. And water indoors is very expensive. So
Yeah.
I really think doing the smaller facility inside and then having a nice facility outside, separate facility, wherever it is the way to go, and it's been proven to be true.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, and Councilman Fisher, I'll just add that I had the opportunity Saturday to meet with, and I hope I get this right, Mike Hathaway, who's a director at Onstage, and we talked about a number of different things, but one of the things that came out of that conversation was that he, you know, he fully understands and expects, you know, well, he embraces a new facility for sure, but he fully understands and expects that there's got to be some sort of fundraising, compensation, commitment on their side, you know, to the thing. It's not, you know, his comment to me was while we were talking, he says, I realize that we're not gonna be able to pay $10 a year in any new facility. So, I mean, I think they're fully aware of that. They're on board with that piece. And I think the other thing too that I don't wanna lose sight of is that we're focusing on the theater component and on stage, and that's great, but, you know, we also have the Arts Guild, and we have, you know, the Arts Council, we have other arts functions going on, so I don't want to lose sight that we're not including the function, you know, in terms of what we're doing in that respect. So, okay, so I had some other people here. Dr. Turner was next.
Thank you, Mayor. I too was impressed by the public hearings that we had. There seemed to be a feeling of all or nothing. The response to supporting the $70 million, let's do it right if we're going to do it at all, seemed to be pretty broad spread throughout the meeting. Most people did not want to go halfway with it. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. You know, I think that we ought to be sure there's wording in the ordinance that would include the option of building an arts center of some sort, including performance arts, that would allow us the option of building it in association with the Old Bedford School land with that facility, to give us the option to move from one place to another. It wouldn't restrict us to there. And, you know, I think I'm all excited about it, and I think that we move on. I like the concept of the building on the corner, the outdoor, indoor water. I think the design is there with some makeups. I've heard some concern about the soccer fields. Will there be fences around the soccer field?
From the 2010 plan, they were intended as practice soccer fields, so it's open space. And with soccer fields too, you want to be able to turn the field so you don't wear out the center of the field. You could have a larger field, 2 smaller fields, 3 mini fields. So it's open space that can be used for practice soccer.
Practice and games?
Yes, you can do games there, but it's not a fenced complex that only the soccer association could use. You can fly kites on it if there's not a soccer practice.
One of the concerns I heard was the ball's going into the water because it's pretty close there to at least the stream going up there, and there was some concern, and they were expressing the desire for fences around it. But that would limit it as green space really, and other options.
I think so if we're redoing the area, if we save the existing buildings, that limits us somewhat, but there's some things we could do grading-wise to help with that. Also, we could, how we have the short, nice fence between the playground and the channel and the ponds. There could be something like that where it doesn't restrict the view or have that prison look of a chain link fence around a field. And it's still nice, and that would keep someone from running across the sidewalk or trail or something too when they were having a practice.
I think that this is a great project. There are a lot of details that will need to be worked out still yet, but I think we need to move forward with this.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Councilman Sarter.
Thank you, Mayor. I also was encouraged by the public meetings that we had. I was somewhat surprised at the amount of support for the indoor aquatics. I went into those meetings thinking that might be a negative, and I think that was a resounding positive from everyone that spoke. I didn't hear any negative about that. I have a question. I'm not real sure who to ask this question to. If we earmark funds for Old Bedford School, which I do support, does that mean those funds cannot be moved back to Bedford Boys Ranch? Are we dedicating those funds to that project if we do that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Sarter, I think we need to be broad enough in our question to the voters that we're not restricting where we can spend the money. So it needs to be a broad enough question that would allow us to make improvements at Old Bedford School in addition to what we're talking about at the Boys Ranch as well. I would ask Stan to weigh in if he feels otherwise, but I think we can write it in such a way that would be broad enough to spend it at both, so we're not restricted in any way.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, I concur. I think we can. I think we can draft the language, which is fairly common on a broad bond package. We will certainly consult with bond counsel to get the flexibility, not only to move money around within the parameters of the question presented to the voters, but also to address the inevitable unknown contingencies.
Would language also be crafted that doesn't allow this bond money to be spent for some other project that may be outside the scope of our discussion?
Certainly, we do have to frame it with some parameters so as to avoid that possibility.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Stan.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, simply if it's recreational arts and culture kind of components, then,
Sure.
Clearly it's not going to be spent for streets or,
And that's my point.
From that kind of context.
Correct. I think the project's a worthy project.
That's just a loose interpretation of how I would frame it, but they'll make a better job of it.
Okay.
All right, Councilman Gebhardt. Thank you, Councilman Sarter.
Thank you, Mayor. I hate to be the lone splash of cold water in all this. I just have some great concerns. Texas is second in the nation for municipal debt. And, Bedford has some severe economic challenges right now. I mean, we're having to twist and turn over our budget planning because of the very strong economic pressures that our city faces. And yet we're just going to push for a gigantic bond. I don't dispute that our facilities are aging and not necessarily well, but do we need to spend $70 million now when we're already facing large financial pressures? I'm unmoved by a very unscientific Facebook survey and by self-selected surveys and hand raisings. That's not a good indicator of the electorate. In fact, that's another strong concern, is that the majority of the electorate in Bedford is tax frozen. Most of the voters in Bedford are over 65. You guys probably should know that. So you have a strong majority of voters voting to assume debt that they don't bear any burden for. That's a tremendous concern for me. I see that we're just doing something to have a nice new thing. And I don't dispute it'll be great. It's going to be fabulous. It'll be shiny. It'll be new. It'll be wonderful. But we don't always, it's not always the prudent thing to just automatically get the new shiny thing. I don't drive new cars. My wife drives a very safe car, but I don't buy new cars because I have to be fiscally prudent. And I think it behooves us to consider that and not just doing this thing because a certain subgroup has voiced an appetite to spend a lot of money for a really cool new project. I'm very concerned that this is going to put us in a position where it's going to place a large burden on our taxpayers in Bedford. It's not going to have the desired effect. I understand about thinking bold, but I think we're very more into wishful thinking to think that a project like this will make a direct economic impact anywhere within a very close time period. Certainly when everybody's feeling the hard effects of that additional debt on our city. I urge caution.
Thank you, Councilman Gebhardt. Councilwoman Sable.
Mark, I have a question for you. You're putting that big building at the corner of Forest Ridge and Harwood, and it looks like the mechanicals would be up against Harwood. Like you'd have to put all your equipment and your deliveries on that side.
Your mic on?
No. Stephen, would you like to talk about how we would deal with that? Stephen's with Brinkley Sergeant Wigington and designed the NRH Center.
Because that's probably what I didn't really like about that corner. I thought it was a pretty big building, and if you put the entrances on one side, then you've got the back side of every building is not the most attractive.
Yeah, the short answer is we don't know. We
Okay.
haven't been designed yet. But I would volunteer that it's not unusual for rec centers to be located in parks, and therefore we always have, well, not always, we often face the challenge of how do you build a building without a back, because every side of the building is visible in a park setting. So that would be a challenge that we would overcome during the design of the project. And a perfect example is where do you put the dumpster? Even if you put all the mechanical on the roof, the dumpster has to go someplace. So those are all items that we'll get to however you guys decide to move forward, whether it be screening, whether it be integrating into the architecture or the site design, to make sure that some necessary evil has to go somewhere screened or hidden or not a feature at the very least.
Okay, I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Sable. Councilman Boyder.
Thank you, Mayor Mark.
Yes, sir.
You spent so much time doing things in Bedford. Why have you not moved here yet?
Based on tonight's meeting, I think I'm going to.
Okay.
No, I've become very fond of this place, and we appreciate having gotten to work here so long on so many
You
different
have
things.
definitely have left a mark on this town.
Is it?
No.
Now for the
Okay, in the drawings, the mayor and I were perplexed at trying to find the skate park in the drawing.
We have not drawn in the skate park yet.
Okay.
We can find a place for the skate park. We work with skate park folks.
Okay.
as someone alluded to, there is still work to be done to finalize the plan. A lady tonight commented on wanting more picnic pavilions, which is doable. You know, with a budget, with contingencies, that's not crazy, but gives us flexibility to do all the things, we can address all of those concerns and issues. And
Okay.
we still need to come up with a plan for Splash, and there's several things, and, you know, there needs to be a really detailed plan and architectural elevation done of the center too. So, yeah, there's room in the budget for it, we can do it, and we will find a place for it in the plan.
So in your packet, you've got several items here where you put some estimates as to the cost.
Yes,
Baseball fourplex, you have $4 million.
yes.
I can't comprehend how we put $4 million into that right
Okay,
now.
well, the lighting is very expensive. The preferred type of lighting for sports complexes is Musco lighting with their controlling system. It's sharp cutoff, which is good for the light pollution. It also is very easy to control and maintain. They have a 20-year warranty. So what we're thinking, you know, we're not gonna put up, unless you tell us to, or there's no budget, put up galvanized chain link fences. It would be black vinyl coated chain link fencing. It would have mow strips so you don't have weeds growing along or they have to weed eat it. We even have a chance to do synthetic fields so they're more playable and stay green all year round.
Okay, you're losing me. You're going too deep into this.
So we're talking about a
So-
first-rate type facility
Are
for
we,
everything.
are we talking about gutting what we have?
Oh,
and
yes.
coming back with a complete new layout?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that the same with the tennis courts?
Yes,
Okay, it's interesting, Mr. Sarter brought this up earlier. I had talked with an individual who's on the, he's a director with the local USTA, and they said they would love to do tournaments in Bedford, but they will not do it with only 7 courts. They have to have a minimum of 8. And otherwise, they're going to, like you said, Coppell and the North Richland Hills.
right.
But
We-
that there's a lot of people here that actually go to those tournaments.
Sure. We've shown 7, we have room to do 8. We have budget right now to do 8. And I apologize, some of the things we haven't shown because we're trying to walk the line because we really didn't know what the public would support funding-wise or what you would. We've included money. We can do an 8-court complex.
See, and
We
that
would love to
lends,
have 10 or
that
12.
lends itself to some of my concerns before, and at this point, it's a moot point because I couldn't get anyone to listen to me. But my concern was that we were blowing through this process so fast that there was a degree of diligence that wasn't included in some of this. Not to say that there hasn't been diligence. However, the tennis court was an example of that. That here is a director in that organization who's willing to bring money to our facility, yet we're not asking the right questions. And so I only bring that up for that point about, in as much as we're going forward and you're doing your processes, you know, I want to look for opportunities to maximize our gain here.
Yes.
That we can pick up in bringing more people to use this facility.
Sure.
So essentially, in as much as we're looking at all the outdoor items, everything then is going to be a gut.
I'm sorry, what?
A gut, and you're just going to rebuild over whatever.
It's really time. It's
Okay.
right. The thing we don't want to gut is the new utility work, the sewer things that Kenny have put in, and, you know, and we know where that is now, and we can protect and preserve the
Yeah.
utilities. But the roads, the aging athletic facilities, and let me say this, that there is an exercise, we ask about the time, the 2 years and the 3 years. There's another next level of exercise to go through. We're tree topping, it's a vision, it's a budget, but when we develop the plans for the tennis center, you know, that's when we will show the 8 courts
Okay.
and decide if we're gonna do a pro shop or not.
I still have a recovering headache from some of the earlier conversations, so I can't comprehend what you're saying right now. I'll be honest with you, I completely respect what Mr. Gephardt says. And this is where I myself am at something of a crossroad here too, because, you know, everything in my being says I don't want to spend any more money. But, you know, I keep coming back to kind of lessons learned several months ago, which was, in my mind, I think Bedford is painfully close to being an also-ran. That we have had opportunities in the past to do something with our town, And we've chosen not to do it because we've lived in fear for a long time. And taking the step of trying to make a commitment to making your town better means bold decisions. And unfortunately, it means there's an economic aspect to doing that. And you know, everything that I have done when I was on council previously and now is about being economically efficient and economically wise with the money that we spend. But I find myself now looking at Bedford wanting more. And I think Phase Next is an opportunity to do that. Am I excited that it's a potentially $70 million project? I am absolutely not excited about that. But I think inasmuch as we look forward with Bedford, we have to ask ourselves what we want this town to be and what is the future makeup of this town. Who are the people who are going to live here in the future? I don't know that Bedford is going to be a successful, sustainable community if the future residents of Bedford are antiquated people who are happy with a 70-year-old facility to work out in or a park. The future of Bedford is a sustainable model where we're attracting families here who like the lifestyle, who will encourage more businesses to develop here and encourage more restaurants and places to eat out and who knows what else. That as we exist now, we are painfully close to relegating ourselves to being nothing, because everyone around us is growing. Everyone around us, I won't say they're thriving, but they're clearly visibly growing. And Bedford, for some reason, because of choices we've made in the past, we are locked in time, a time of the past. And so I now have accepted a reality that I now want more for what Bedford should be in the future, and I'm willing to take risks with developing a world-class facility here. I mean, a facility that everyone's going to be proud of, and for us to develop a community that everyone wants to move to, and that they want to bring their kids, and they want to spend money, and they want to spend time in the park. So I have now gotten on board with this project. There are some parts of this I'm not extremely excited about. I don't really, the banquet side of this, I think we're in competition with the cities of Hearst and others. I don't know that I don't have faith that we're going to do that productively or do that well. But I'm absolutely on board with, I think we have an underutilized location in the old Bedford School that if we can challenge ourselves to think outside the box, that we can find better uses for that, in as much as it could be an entertainment complex or more, while enhancing what we have in that building as well. So I'm excited about the prospect of this. I'm excited about the diligence portion of this going forward, because I would like to see us maximize our ability to find some uniqueness in this facility that every other facility doesn't have.
Sure.
Something that makes us something of a destination, something more that people will be more proud of. So I want to thank you and thank the council for giving me the opportunity to kind of get comfortable with this. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Boyder. Councilman Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. I got laughed at a second ago for making a principal vote on a silly item, talking about local control, and like Councilman Boyder, understand the impacts of $70 million and what that does for your tax rate. Your tax rate will go up, okay? And we talked about this at length on Friday. But to respond to Councilman Gephardt, it's this vote. We've presented a layout. We've presented a budget, and we're allowing the people to vote. Rarely do the people get to vote on bond issues, and if they want it, they're going to vote for it, and if they don't, they're going to turn it down, and we have our answer. But I think that. I think that's the most democratic way of doing it, is put forth a plan, an idea. It needs refinement. There's no doubt about it. It needs refinement. I don't want to ever go to the voters and say, this is it. It needs work. But we need to get the process started and let the people decide. Let the people decide. That's all we can ask for.
Thank you, Councilman Fisher. Dr. Turner?
I want to thank Councilman Boyder for the term also ran, because I do believe that Bedford is on the verge of an also ran. We can turn in on ourselves and essentially become part of Euless somewhere down the front row, I mean, it's down the line, or we can take matters into our hands and look to the future. And yes, $70 million is a lot of money. And I don't, if you say it real quick, it's not quite as much, but still, it's a lot of money. It's something that I take seriously, whether we want to go. But as Deputy Pro Tem Mayor Pro Tem said, it's going to come down to the voters. Councilman Gebhardt questioned the validity of the surveys that we alluded to in the public meetings. And yes, they certainly were not scientific, but I think the election in November would be scientific enough for the people to speak forth for or against this project. And this project, along with some of the other things that are developing and on the drawing board for Bedford, will answer the question, are we ready to be an also-ran city? Are we ready to move forward? So I thoroughly support it, knowing that there are many details that need to be worked out yet. And I also would respond to Councilman Gebhardt's statement that us over 65 people are not paying taxes. At the last time I looked at my tax bill, I'm paying a pretty darn good bit of taxes. If you compare it, over 65 taxes to under 65 taxes, they're not that far apart. So I resent the fact that you indicate these people out here, I don't know, I don't see anybody who looks over 65. But there are some out here. I see Mr. Oh, there's Roy Savage back there. So we got two here, but we pay taxes too. Even though our rate may be slightly lower, we pay taxes too.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Councilman Gebhardt?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, I'm not advocating that we do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. My questions concern the scope and the timing of the improvements that are necessary. And also to clarify, I certainly did not accuse Dr. Turner of not paying his taxes. I stated the fact that those under the tax freeze will not see an increase no matter how the vote goes. And finally, I would say it's not bold or different to put a smaller version of the facility that exists within a stone's throw in our park. That's not new, that's not different. We're just taking a smaller version and putting it in our park and saying, see, we have this too. So yeah, we need bold ideas and solutions. We do want to make improvements where we can, but just say that if we take a smaller version of the NRH Center and put it in our park, all of a sudden we're not an also-ran because we have one too. I reject that logic.
Really? Yep. Speak again. Councilwoman Sable.
I just want to thank everybody. I think this project took a whole different turn when actually the arts were left out of the survey. And when the arts got involved and started to come to council, and with emails and however, with your red shirts and all that, I think it was beneficial to the city because we realized that culture and arts has a big piece of Bedford's heart. And because of that, we're actually talking about doing something at Bedford School or changing the whole direction of this park plan and maybe putting more toward the arts on stage, the Arts Council, when before it might not have even been considered. So I want to congratulate the crowd that really put themselves out there. I believe that numbers count, And it does make a difference to council if you speak your voice and you come in numbers. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sable and Councilmember Boyd.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to encourage council to stop thinking small and to start thinking big. I think that because we have thought small in the past and because we have ruled because we were afraid of our own shadow, that we have missed opportunities to be a great community. I think it's time for Bedford to stand up and step out. I think it's time for Bedford to set the example for the other communities in the area, and this is a beginning to do that. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyder. All right, again, Eric, you've been standing there for a long time, did you?
Just one
Did you
point
want to
of
say something?
clarification. We brought up a range of cost recovery between 60 to 75%.
Yes, sir.
Just some feedback on that and just to provide direction on the facility moving forward.
Oh.
So I know Ms. Sable had mentioned a 75% cost recovery. I don't know if that you care to discuss that any further to provide us some direction.
So you want us to give direction on the cost recovery number? Is that what you're asking?
On a cost recovery, just so we can nail down some pricing to move forward.
Well, okay, so if I recall correctly from the, our budget work session,
Right.
we were saying, I thought we said, we all seemed to agree on 60 was a starting point, but we wanted to see, nothing less than 60, I think is the way it was framed. And see what, where we can make improvements. I think it's gonna be a function of what we finally dictate as to what we want. If there's, as has already been stated, if there's an outdoor swimming component, you have a greater chance of some cost recovery versus just limiting ourselves to all indoor swimming component, because of the cost. So
We have a greater return if there are more pickleball courts? Is that the deal?
We have, as I mentioned, Nicholas Valdez is here with us, but as we get the budget, as we do the final due diligence and we make sure we build the best, most unique facility we can, we will update and present to you, along with that, the cost recovery analysis that goes with those final decisions. And I think in the slide I'd showed a range of 65 to 75%. It could do better, but it's all a function of pricing. And I know you want to have affordable pricing for your community, but it has to be sustainable pricing. So we targeted that range because that gives you the flexibility to address the pricing structure that's right, for Bedford. We don't envision this being just like North Richland Hills or Euless or anywhere else. So, okay.
all right. Councilman Sarter.
Mayor, I forgot to mention one item. The chairman of our Parks Board did contact me today and wanted her views to be known that the Parks Board fully supports this program and this project.
Great, thank you, sir. Thank you for that. All right, so anything else, Eric? I mean, that's how we'll kind of approach it at this point, just to wait to see how we get to the final piece of that. But that's kind of the range to. All right, so from my perspective, you've heard a tremendous amount of commentary and input up here, along with our town hall meetings. I clearly view our role up here is to set the vision. To be visionary about what we're trying to do. Councilman Boyder has said it a couple different times tonight about we have a real opportunity, I believe, at this juncture in our history as a city to take the necessary steps, I believe, to start moving us forward. We're not going to get all the way to where we hope to be with one or two decisions, but we have to start making those. And I think clearly, I recall when we did the effort for phase 1 of the Boys Ranch and got into the whole process of trying to justify and explain and talk about what we're doing at the park in phase 1. I continued through that process. So we had a great turnout. We had 67 or plus or higher percentage of people voting in favor of doing, phase 1. But at the whole time I kept talking about, from my perspective, if we just stay true to how we do it, it would be 25 years before we got to phase 4 of how we laid this stuff out at minimum, And so that was the whole reason I coined the idea of phase next, because I kept thinking, how do we kind of squeeze all this into something we can do and do it now? And there's cost savings. If I spend $1 today, it's going to be less expensive than I wait 10 years to spend it, for the same product. So I saw a lot of advantages in that. But I think our role is to do that. So I think what we're trying to do here is cast that vision about what we want to do at the Boys Ranch and at the park and how to take that forward. I think what we've all said here, I think, is that we all, less one that wants us to go slower, Councilman Gephardt really is reluctant for us to jump out there at the mark, but I think majority of us is saying $70 million is a number to shoot for. We're asked the various questions about how to craft the language so we can make sure we can maximize the usage of that funding if it's approved to cover all the things we need at the park and at the old Bedford School and arts and the theater and everything that we're trying to capture. We want to make sure we're addressing those needs. I think that's critical. One of our next tasks is to come back here on the 15th to approve the language that would constitute that bond action. But my question to you guys, and you've heard different questions up here from council members about making sure we do the due diligence, that we dig down into the, to knowing exactly we got 8 tennis courts, or we have this, or we have those things that maximize the return for us, and all those components. Do we have enough time? I mean, are we giving you the proper time? Because we're going to really have to focus down on that and get that down, because we're going to have to share that information at some point. We have to be, as we're talking about the bond initiative heading to November 7th, we have to be able to share pictures and ideas and finalization of what we're doing.
Yes, for example, with the concerns you've raised, I mean, we've had conversations with the USTA before. We did when we worked on expanding the Wagon Wheel Tennis Center, which was too small in Capel. Part of it's money, but the 8-court number, I remember from that study, and that's kind of the minimum. I don't know that we have room for more, but the answer, Mr. Mayor, is yes. I mean, I think perhaps you can see that we've been nimble, and so when we hear a comment, we respond, just like the arts. So we hear a comment about the skate park, we will respond. We hear a comment about the tennis center, we will respond. And so our intent is, should you move forward with this to the bond election, is to immediately start on that more detailed work on the various components. So we can start on the multi-generational center programming. However, you and staff would like us to do that with an advisory committee or with the park board, we can start that process so that we keep the momentum going and we get better and better input as we move closer to knowing if it's voted on by the public. And so we're building, we've actually, I'll tell you this, we've already started working on this 3D visualization because we have limited amount of time. So, we're there with you. We're going to go as fast as we can and be responsive and get it right. It's too critical. I've been waiting 15 years too. So, when we first talked about this.
Well, thank you, Mark.
All right.
All right, council, seeing no more questions, I'm going to hurry before the button changes colors or whatever here. I would entertain a motion. We have a motion by Councilman Boyder. Was that Councilman Boyder?
I hit it first.
He hit it first.
I hit it first.
I need a second then.
Second. I'll second.
You can't both second and first.
Well, he got the first.
Then you got the second.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilman Boyder, I believe. Mr. Wells, is that correct? Second? Yes, sir. All right. So a motion is second to approve moving forward to or calling for a bond election for November 7th to the tune of $70 million, correct? Is that what we're all agreeing to here? Is that how we're framing it?
That was going to be my question.
I mean, is that at this point good enough? We're going to have to work on the language on the 15th, but is that
Right.
good enough at this point?
Yeah, I think so. I'm hearing you're voting on a $70 million bond election. We're not cutting anything out at this point.
All right. All right, that's the plan. Everybody, please vote as you're led. All right, so it passes 6-1 to move forward with that piece.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. And I want to thank your staff too, because they've sat here all night, participating in this process. So thank you guys very much for being part of this too.
Wasn't it fun?